So welcome to this session where I will be discussing these very important topics with my good friend, the Prime Minister of Cabo Verde, Prime Minister Ulisses Correia e Silva, a good friend and a very distinguished leader. First of all, let me make some general comments about the current pandemic and the effects it has been showing, namely in Europe, but also globally. We are in fact in an unprecedented situation. Besides the extremely high costs in human lives, the economic costs are huge. We can say it's one of the biggest crises since there are records in economic history, comparable only to the big crisis of the 30s in the 20th century. A large part of the economies have been simply in lockdown. And so the figures in terms of recession, in terms of negative growth of GDP, but also in terms of unemployment are really extremely worrying. It's true that this pandemic is having consequences all over the world, but there has been asymmetric effects. Not all countries, not all sectors are suffering the same. And that's why I believe it's important also to compare and to discuss what we can do together in Europe and in Africa. So far, Europe has been reacting, I believe, in a determined way, also benefiting from the experience and the lessons learned after the big financial crisis and the so-called Euro crisis in the years 2008 and following. So this time some taboos were already broken and it was possible for the governments to commit to some forms of mutualization and to some more ambitious programs in terms of fiscal support, and that besides, of course, the action of the European Central Bank. But how long will this crisis last? The reality is that nobody knows, because there is a missing variable here. The variable is, can we find a vaccine? Can we find effective therapeutics? And that's not clear at this moment. There are some encouraging news from the vaccine side, but it's not yet confirmed. So one other point it's important to consider is what will this pandemic bring as changes in our countries? I believe it's too soon to say there will be a fundamental change of the paradigm. One thing is sure, there are already changes we can acknowledge. For instance, we are seeing an acceleration of trends that were already there before this pandemic. We are seeing the widening and deepening of some of those trends. For instance, some deglobalization, some diversification, meaning by that some countries, developed countries, more developed economies are bringing onshore some production that was before going to other parts of the world, namely to Asia. We are also seeing some more increase in digitization, precisely because of the problems of personal contacts, because of the pandemic, and other developments. So that's for sure. We are seeing an acceleration of trends that were already before. For instance, following the frictions, the very serious problems between the United States and China. Now, I personally believe it's in our interest in Europe, and probably I believe that's interest in Africa, to keep the world open for business, to keep flow of capital, to keep flow of trade, of foreign investment, flow of people. I think that's important from all our points of view. And also to commit to a rules-based order. I don't think it's good for us to have, for instance, an ineffective WTO, World Trade Organization, or World Health Organization without sufficient, let's say, authority. So we need to work together to keep the multilateral rules-based order. And what we are witnessing today in the world is a kind of a tension between flow on one side and friction. Who is going to win? The flow of people, of goods, of investment, of trade, or the friction of nationalism, protectionism, sometimes chauvinism or xenophobia? That's the real struggle. I believe it's important for Europe, together with our African friends, to keep the world based on this commitment to a global order, because there are some global public goods that we can only achieve together, like sustainability. I mean, the fight against climate change, for instance, like peace and security, but also financial stability, also global public goods like public health. So even if we have different regimes, different political ideologies, and of course we have to recognize that, we should remain committed to a world order based on multilateral rules and common principles, and hopefully common values. We are not in a situation where we can say, your side of the boat is sinking. We may sink all, or we may survive all. I hope that's going to be the case. I'd like now to pass the floor to my good friend, Prime Minister of Cabo Verde. As probably some of you know, Cabo Verde is very dependent on tourism. It's one of the countries in the world that the World Bank considers, in fact, one of the 3 countries in the world more affected, more vulnerable to this pandemic, and it will be very important to listen to its experience. So please, Prime Minister, you have the floor.
So thank you, Mr. Durão Barroso, for the invitation to participate in this forum. I would like to start, before talking about Cape Verde, to talk about Africa conditions, because the emergency condition of the pandemic have clearly shown the high cost of disconnecting economies from one another and the terrible consequences of restricting mobility of people, goods, and ideas. Everyone loses. Some may lose more than others, but it's a net loss for everyone. Directly to the point, the key to Africa's ability to move forward is the forgiveness of external debt, not only to tackle the macroeconomic imbalance caused by the coronavirus crisis, but to free up resources that could be invested in promoting structural change. This could be a critical turning point for sustainable development on the continent, on the African continent. We have to achieve external relief, not only in debt service, but in a significant reduction of external holdings. In addition to current multilateral efforts in Africa, a special look at the small islands developing states is needed. Cabo Verde is a small island in the developing states and in graduated. And particularly for those countries that have graduated to middle income status and have been carrying out critical economic and institutional reforms to achieve the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. In Cabo Verde, we will dedicate this resource that we can have if the forgiveness of the debt is coming. We can use this, our 2030 Strategic Sustainable Development Agenda. We have worked tireless to define and clarify our priorities. Let me share with you some priorities. First, human capital development. It's the key of the resource for the development. Quality education and training and the better use of skills of our diaspora. Strengthening institutional capital. Democracy, strong institutions, political and social stability, good governance, and low reputational risk for Cape Verde is very important. Third point, energy transition. I am proud to report we are well underway and plan to be 50% renewable by 2030 and 100% by 2040. Including electric mobility. And the blue economy for us is very, very important too. We are more sea than land. While working to position Cape Verde as a platform in maritime service, we talk about smart agriculture, further diversifying for use of water resource, including desalinization associated with renewable energy, and one point very important for us, capitalizing on our strategic partnerships with the European Union and United States, and as well our regional integration in ECOWAS. Cabo Verde needs strong anchors that leverage the economy's internal financing capacity and reduce its economic, environmental, and security vulnerabilities. We see this as a win-win approach for sustainable development. That's my first point. Then we can talk about the situation in Cabo Verde after the first step of the fight of the pandemic in Cabo Verde.
No, I thank you. I think it's very important what you said. I very much agree with this line. And I personally know your commitment to this agenda. I visited Cabo Verde. I had the pleasure to meet you in December before this pandemic, and I understood how important was, and it is, I think, still today, the wave of modernization of your country. I really want to congratulate you for that. And of course, this pandemic has now put very, very serious obstacles, but I hope that we are going to remove them. But if I may make a point also in general about Africa, a point is regarding vaccines. I already co-signed with other former heads of government and heads of state. I'm a member of this club, the Madrid, where we have former prime ministers and presidents of republic. I signed a letter to the G20 asking them precisely to ensure that when a vaccine or some vaccines are ready, that they are distributed to all countries in the world, including the developing countries. Because I'm afraid we are seeing also some kind of vaccine nationalism or vaccine protectionism, and it's not fair for the countries that have, of course, less resources. And I also took a position in favor of debt cancellation to the countries that are now more affected. So I hope that it's not just postponement of the service of the debt, that was already agreed, and that's certainly a good thing, but I think at least partial debt cancellation makes sense for those countries that are most affected, and that's the case, I know, of Cabo Verde and other African countries, because, as I said earlier, we have asymmetric effects. Some countries are more affected than others, and some sectors like tourism, for instance. Tourism and also everything that has to do with the tourism and leisure industry has been more impacted than other sectors. So I think we have to design an intelligent way of supporting those who have a bigger impact of this crisis. And I will do my best in my networks to work with my European friends for them to show also this solidarity, because it makes sense from a justice point of view, but also from a, let's say, self-interest enlightened point of view. Please.
So, thank you. I agree. I think we need the globalization for the vaccine because the asymmetry between the countries that have the power and the capacity to buy and to have a vaccine for all the people, it's very important. In Cape Verde, I can tell you, we are now, I think, the country that in Africa that do more tests. About 10% of our population is tested now. And we continue, because for us it's a question of transparency, but a question of to have good tools to fight the pandemic. Before the pandemic, Cape Verde economy had been growing at an annual rate about more than 5%. Since 2016, we enjoyed macroeconomic stability, consolidation of public accounts, increased foreign direct investment, and reduced unemployment. Tourism was on its way to 1 million visitors annually. All of these results were being achieved despite 3 consecutive years of severe drought. With the crisis of the pandemic of COVID-19, we slowed our progress considerably. and the consequences have been harsh. An economic recession that could reach 8.5% in this year, significant increase in public debt, and such in unemployment. But we have and will continue to make a great effort to save lives. It's our first priority, while protecting business, jobs, and families, while doing it well, and the early results are encouraging. We have financed this extraordinary effort with support of our development partners. I can tell you, European Union is our partner in terms of reference, more important in Cape Verde, and in this case of this pandemic, the European Union was present with good intervention with us. We increased our external debt because we need to finance extraordinary costs, and we had a strong solidarity from our diaspora. That's why we are still alive, and we think few countries in the world have enough savings to face the extraordinary costs caused by the coronavirus crisis. That's why the European Union created a financial bazooka, as Prime Minister António Costa said. Cape Verde needs a very, 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 very small part of this bazooka because the tourism is very, very, in terms of the effect, the impact, with a lot of problem, but we're now to position Cape Verde as a safe and a clean country. We restore confidence in relaunch and further diversify our tourism sector. Most immediately, we have working hard to resume tourism activity in Sal Islands and Boa Vista, while doing a lot of investment to promote a good condition of sanitary and health condition to attract, to relaunch the confidence. I think for us it's the key, and it's very, very important.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I really was delighted to listen to you when you spoke about the importance of diaspora. You know, we are organizing, this is the Portuguese Council for Diaspora. We believe the diasporas can be extremely important to support our countries, and I'm delighted to see that that's the case with Cabo Verde. I hope also the Portuguese diaspora, together with the Cabo Verde diaspora, will work for this very important and ambitious agenda. I see you are on the right track. I was also delighted to listen to what you said about the commitment of the European Union to continue the strong support to Cabo Verde. Thank you very much for participating in this panel of the Euro-African Forum. All the best for you personally and for your great country, because I really think it's a great country. It's a small country geographically, but it's one of the countries that has been doing better in terms of social development and cultural development in Africa with very limited resources, but it's a great case of good governance in Africa. So all the best for you and for your country. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Durão Barroso. It was a pleasure to talk with you. It's a privilege, and I hope to have you in Cape Verde to share with us good moments after the pandemic of coronavirus.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Obrigado.
Thank you. Obrigado.